everyone, ready to unpack some serious baggage. And no, I'm not talking about your overstuffed suitcase from that trick you took 5 years ago.
We're going deeper than that.
Mm.
Today, we're diving into emotional baggage. You know, that invisible stuff we all carry around from past experiences.
Invisible baggage, huh? Sounds a little spooky. I'm intrigued, but definitely want to hear more about what we're unpacking today.
So, the document we're exploring calls it the emotional field. Imagine this invisible field around you, like an energy field, and it's basically been recording your feelings about, well, everything you've ever experienced, every little thing.
So it's like a giant cosmic mood ring reflecting every emotion we've ever had. Okay, I'm officially interested. But how does that even work?
Well, think of it like this. Our brains are wired to hold on to certain memories more strongly, especially the ones with, let's say, a lot of emotional charge. You know those events you just can't seem to shake, even years later?
Oh, tell me about it. Some things you just can't erase from the old memory bank. But why do our brains latch onto those emotional memories so tightly?
It's basically a survival mechanism. Way back in the day, it helped us remember dangers and avoid them in the future. So like, remember that time you touched that flickering fire? Don't do that again.
Makes sense. Our brains are always looking out for us, even if it means holding on to some not-so-pleasant memories. But how does that turn into baggage we carry around?
Well, imagine a tough breakup. It's not just the facts of what happened. It's the emotional wallop, the sadness, the anger, maybe even a dose of fear for good measure. That's the stuff that really sticks with us.
So even if we think we've logically moved on, those emotional leftovers are still hanging around.
They can, yeah. The emotional impact can linger, even if we think we've dealt with it. And it's not just the big dramatic stuff that leaves its mark. All those smaller experiences, those daily disappointments and frustrations, they add up over time, too.
It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts, but for our emotions. You might not even notice each individual cut, but eventually it's going to leave a mark.
Okay, so we've established that we've all got this emotional history, this invisible baggage we're lugging around. But then the document mentions something called trapped emotions. Is that the same thing or something different? It's a great question. They're related but different. Think of it this way. Ideally, we process emotions in a healthy way. We feel them, we learn from them, and then we release them.
Makes sense. But what happens when they don't get released? What are trapped emotions exactly?
It's like those emotions get stuck. They haven't been fully processed and released, so they kind of get lodged in our systems like an energetic knot that just won't come untied. And what's really wild is that the document suggests this can actually manifest physically.
Wait, really? You're saying that unexplained aches, tension, maybe even those recurring headaches could be linked to trapped emotions?
That's exactly what this document is suggesting. Our minds and bodies are way more connected than we realize. All that emotional baggage, it creates stress. And stress loves to manifest in the body.
Okay, that's blowing my mind a little bit. So this isn't just about feeling a little emotionally bruised. This stuff can have a real impact on our physical well-being.
It's all connected. And where this gets super interesting is how this all plays out in our relationships.
Okay, yes. Because who hasn't felt like their past relationships, even those from way back when, are somehow showing up in their current ones? Like, how is this happening again? I feel like I should know better.
It's like our subconscious minds are drawn to what feels familiar, even if that familiar isn't particularly healthy.
So even if on a conscious level we're trying to create healthy, loving relationships, our subconscious might be accidentally steering us right back into the same dysfunctional dynamics.
Like a broken compass that keeps leading you to the same spot, even though you know it's not the right destination.
And this is where I think a lot of listeners are going to be nodding along, right? Because who hasn't experienced this in some form?
Absolutely. It's incredibly common. And the document actually outlines some specific relationship patterns, and they are so insightful. It's like looking in a mirror and finally understanding why we keep repeating the same dynamics.
All right, I am ready to dive into these patterns. Let's do it. Okay, let's unravel these relationship patterns. First up is, and I think we all know this one, the people pleaser, always bending over backwards to make others happy, even at their own expense.
Oh, the people pleasers. Definitely a classic pattern. And, you know, it often comes down to this deep need for approval. Like they're trying to earn love by being good and helpful.
It's like their self-worth hinges on making everyone around them happy. And what's interesting is they often end up with partners who aren't exactly the giving type.
Right. It's like they're subconsciously drawn to people who actually reinforce that belief that they're not worthy of love unless they're constantly giving, giving, giving.
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The
Yeah.
more they give, the less they receive, and the more that belief gets cemented. It's kind of a vicious cycle. Okay, the next one is the fearful partner. And this one hits a little too close to home for me. It's that tendency to recreate that dynamic of abandonment in relationships.
We all have our patterns, right?
Yeah.
And with this one, it's like the subconscious mind is seeking out that familiar feeling, even if it's painful. It's almost counterintuitive.
So even though they consciously desire a secure, loving connection, they might subconsciously seek out partners who are emotionally unavailable or distant.
Exactly. It's like that old saying, better the devil you know. On some level, that emotional distance feels safer, even if it's incredibly painful in the long run.
Because it's what they're used to. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Let's move on to the control enthusiast. This one might seem like the opposite of the fearful partner, but I have a feeling it comes from a similar place.
You're spot on. It's still rooted in insecurity. Instead of seeking distance, they try to control everything to feel safe. Every detail planned, every decision scrutinized. It's exhausting.
Oh, I know the type. Always have to be right, always have to be in charge. It's like they can't relax and let go. But at the heart of it, it's about anxiety and that fear of losing control, right?
Exactly. Now, shifting gears a bit, the caretaker is up next. This is another big one I see in my practice. Always giving to others, often to the point of burnout.
They're the ones who are everyone else's rock, always there to lend a hand or offer support, but often neglecting their own needs in the process. It's a tough pattern. What's at the root of that one?
It often boils down to this belief that their worth is directly tied to their ability to care for others. They're worthy of love because they're helpful, not necessarily because of who they are inherently.
So they're pouring from an empty cup, constantly giving but not receiving in return. No wonder they're burnt out. And then, of course, we have the validation seeker. I feel like this one's particularly relevant these days with social media and that constant need for external approval.
Oh, absolutely. And in relationships, that can look like needing constant reassurance, attention, fishing for compliments. It can get exhausting for everyone involved.
It's like they're trying to fill a void within themselves by seeking validation from someone else who probably has their own set of insecurities.
Two mirrors reflecting emptiness at each other. Not exactly a recipe for a healthy, fulfilling connection. Okay, last but not least, we have the unheard voice pattern. This one is particularly heartbreaking.
It's that feeling of being unseen, unheard in a relationship, like your thoughts, your feelings, your needs, they just don't seem to matter.
Exactly. And what's sad is they often end up with partners who are emotionally unavailable or dismissive, which just perpetuates that cycle of feeling unseen and unheard. It's a tough pattern to break.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, and I know some of these patterns are going to resonate with our listeners. I mean, I'm seeing myself in a few of them, but recognizing these patterns is actually a good thing, right? Because it's the first step to breaking free.
Awareness is key. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. And the great news is, this document actually offers some techniques for doing just that.
All right, I'm ready to hear about these techniques. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's talk about these techniques for actually unpacking all this emotional baggage. The document mentions something called mesa frequential quantica, and I have to admit, that sounds a little intimidating.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, isn't it? Don't worry, you don't need a degree in quantum physics to understand it.
Okay, good, because that's not happening. So break it down for us. What is mesa frequential quantica?
Basically, remember those trapped emotions, those little knots of energy we talked about? Well, this is a way to gently unravel them.
So it's not about erasing the past, but more about releasing the emotional charge that's still stuck with us.
Exactly. It's like neutralizing the intensity of those old emotions so they don't have power over us anymore. Imagine letting go of that old resentment that's been weighing you down or that heartbreak you thought you'd never recover from.
That sounds amazing. But how does it actually work? Do we have to, like, visualize our emotions as knots or something?
Well, it's based on the idea that our bodies and emotions are made up of energy, right? Everything is energy. And Mesa Frequential Quantica uses specific frequencies to target and release those blocked energies, allowing them to flow freely again.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like hitting the reset button on our emotional energy field. So cool.
I like that, the reset button. And the document also mentions another interesting one, vibrational therapy. Familiar with that at all?
I've definitely heard of it. But I'll be honest, I always picture, like, someone using tiny tuning forks on my chakras.
I get it. It does have a bit of a mystical vibe to it. But at its core, vibrational therapy is really about using sound and energy to shift our emotional state. Different frequencies can have a powerful effect on our minds and bodies.
So are we talking about listening to specific types of music or sounds? What does that actually look like?
It can involve a lot of different methods. Things like singing bowls, tuning forks, even specific vocal tones can be used. The key is finding the frequencies that resonate with your own energy and help release those stuck emotions.
That makes a lot of sense. And one thing I really appreciate about this document is that it doesn't just focus on these, more esoteric therapies. It also talks about things like breath work and meditation, which feel a lot more accessible to the average person.
Absolutely. Don't underestimate the power of those practices. They might seem simple, but they can be incredibly effective for calming the nervous system, becoming more aware of our emotional patterns, and learning to process our emotions in a healthier way.
Sometimes the simplest tools are the most powerful. But for those who are ready to really dive deep, the document mentions the work of Simone Guevara-Brum.
Yes, Simon Guevara-Brum has done some really groundbreaking work in this field. He created something called the Wheel of Emotions, which is essentially a map of human emotions.
Okay, a map of emotions. That's interesting. Tell me more.
It can help you pinpoint specific trapped emotions, get really specific about what you're dealing with. And once you know what you're working with, you can use various therapeutic techniques to address them.
So for our listeners who are really ready to unpack their emotional baggage, checking out Simone Guevara-Brum's work could be a great next step.
Definitely. It's all about empowering ourselves,
Mm.
right? We all have this baggage, these patterns, and it's part of being human, but we don't have to let them control us. There are ways to heal, to grow, and to create healthier, happier relationships.
I love that. It's a journey, not a quick fix,
Yeah,
but it's a journey worth taking.
couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground today, but before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question to ponder. If your body is holding on to unprocessed emotions, what message is it trying to tell you that you haven't fully heard yet? That's something to think about. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.